Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling something incredibly practical. I want you to think about that very specific, sinking feeling of staring at a newly generated user interface. You know the one. You perfectly crafted your prompt, you hit enter, and what comes back is, well, it's just clunky. It's completely generic. Sure, it technically works, but it feels like this soulless, messy patchwork of floating buttons and bizarre spacing. So, our mission today is pretty straightforward. We are going to figure out exactly how to transform those messy, sometimes entirely incomprehensible AI interfaces into intentional, cohesive product design. Let's dive right in. I think it's safe to say we share a massive frustration right now. Almost every new landing page, app, or text interface looks exactly the same. They're mostly just what we can accurately call slop. But there is hope. Today, we're breaking down a deeply pragmatic 7-step playbook to fix it. And honestly, the best part about this playbook is that it was developed by an engineer. This is someone who readily admits they are not a formally trained designer. They have zero background in typography or color theory. They just absolutely hate this AI slop and the terrible user experience it creates, and they figured out a systematic way to fix it that any builder can apply right away. But before we get to those steps, you have to ask yourself this. Do you find yourself constantly, reactively patching bad AI designs? Are you essentially playing an endless game of design whack-a-mole? You tell the AI to fix a button's padding, and suddenly, out of nowhere, the entire navigation bar is misaligned. So you fix the nav bar, and now your text is completely illegible. This happens for one simple reason: you aren't setting intentional constraints from the start. If that sounds painfully familiar, don't worry, you are definitely not alone. To fix this, we have to stop the reactive, immediate execution and start planning our macro-level strategy. Which brings us to Section 1. Always consider the whole. Here's the core of it: a rigorous, highly effective 3-step design loop. Step 1. Lay out literally all the constraints you are designing for. Step 2. Consider an array of solutions that actually satisfy those constraints. And Step 3. If you realize a constraint needs to be added or removed, you stop and you go right back to Step 1. The absolutely crucial takeaway here is that deciding your constraints has to happen way before you jump headfirst into solution mode. Think about things like font and sizing rules, specific user workflows you have to support, or complex business logic. If you don't define these boundaries up front, you create a vacuum. And trust me, AI agents will eagerly fill that vacuum by hallucinating wild, inconsistent design choices that will completely derail your project. What's really fascinating is the origin of this theory. It's grounded in Christopher Alexander's phenomenal book, Notes on the Synthesis of Form. The key insight here is that the most common trap we fall into as engineers is skipping that vital third step, adjusting the constraints. We just get stubborn, right? We try to brute force a solution to work without realizing that our underlying requirements have actually shifted. And when you skip that step, you inevitably end up with a disjointed patchwork design. It randomly prioritizes some interactions over others, and it just leaves your users totally confused.
To see what happens when you ignore those constraints, just picture an incredibly dense user interface, one that packs a massive amount of information and actions into a really tiny space. When a user inevitably gets lost in that chaos, our natural temptation is to jump in and spot fix. You immediately prompt the AI, hey, make this button more prominent, or add a quick link to do this. But that is the exact design whack-a-mole we just talked about. It actually makes the mess worse by adding even more visual noise. Instead of instantly reacting, you should start tracking these minor user paper cuts in a totally separate document. Writing them down saves you from the whack-a-mole trap, letting you address all those issues cohesively during a proper, well-thought-out redesign. Moving right along to Section 2, remove the agent's litter. This next tactical step targets a core, built-in tendency of AI that we just have to actively manage. If you've ever used AI to write code, you already know this. Agents love to add stuff. They absolutely love what we call belt and suspenders logic. It's like wearing a belt and suspenders at the same time just to keep your pants up. Overly cautious, totally redundant. They'll wrap extra try-catches around everything, while they do the exact same thing when generating a UI. They act like digital hoarders who absolutely refuse to leave any white space empty. They love adding extra explanatory text, unnecessary divider lines, redundant icons. The result might initially look a bit more polished than a back-end engineer's wireframe, but structurally, it's cluttered and confusing. Your job is to step in and relentlessly remove those unnecessary parts. So what does removing the litter actually look like in practice?
As the person driving this process, you need to look at every single element on the screen and ruthlessly ask yourself, do I actually need this? Strip away that extra text that nobody ever reads. Remove the redundant borders that just trap the user's eye for no reason. Delete the extra buttons that just duplicate actions you can already find elsewhere. By keeping things incredibly clean and focused, you instantly elevate the professionalism of your product, and you save your users a massive cognitive headache. Now let's jump to Section 3, Iterate Outside the Code. We're shifting focus to micro-level execution here, which is really all about choosing the absolute best environment for your iteration. There's a crucial concept you need to know called prototype gravity. It is literally the silent killer of good design. Prototype gravity happens when you have the AI agent build the first version directly inside your working code base. The psychology of this is super powerful. Once that code is merged and it's sitting right there in your project, it feels so much easier to just tweak and refine that mediocre first draft. We somehow convince ourselves it's faster than exploring genuinely better options. Plus, designing in your real codebase forces the agent to graft its brand new ideas onto your existing messes and constraints, completely killing its ability to iterate freely. So how do we escape prototype gravity? Simple, by absolutely refusing to iterate on design inside the product itself. You should be using tools meant specifically for design. Working outside your codebase is a game changer because it gives you and the AI a pure blank canvas. You aren't fighting your legacy CSS or messy HTML structure. You should have the AI generate 3 to 4 completely different variants of everything in a sandbox environment. Some highly recommended tools for this include Figma, Cursor Design Mode, Claude Design, or even just spinning up really simple isolated HTML prototypes. And honestly, Figma is still the GOAT, the greatest of all time for this process. Its native AI integration is getting better literally every single week. Using a dedicated design tool like this gives you incredibly fine control, letting you iterate rapidly without all that extra code context getting in the way. When you treat the AI as a true design partner inside a dedicated tool, rather than just a code monkey hacking away at your production front end, the aesthetic and functional results are just vastly superior. All right, Section 4, Components, Deploys, and Stealing. Let's move into the highly practical implementation phases. This step might sound a bit basic to seasoned front-end engineers, but it's absolutely vital. Strictly separate your views from your logic and build reusable components. Doing this pays massive dividends because it makes your app visually cohesive, instead of a jarring Frankenstein monster of slightly different buttons and input fields. A fantastic way to enforce this is by maintaining an internal, forward-facing showcase page. Think of it as your safe sandbox. Have your agents build UI components there first, totally isolated from your core logic. That way you can play with them, stress test them, and refine them before they ever have the chance to break your production app. Next up, you absolutely have to validate these designs with real data. And the best way to do that is with preview deploys. Why does this matter so much? Because holding a design in your hands, fully populated with real production data, is the ultimate reality check. It bridges that massive gap between a theoretical, perfect AI design and the messy reality of the actual user experience. Even if the AI builds exactly what you asked for, seeing it with real usernames, super long text strings, and actual back-end data might make you instantly realize, wow, this just doesn't work. By separating front and back-end pull requests, you can use automated GitHub actions to spin up these preview deploys, making that human verification step totally frictionless. And the final piece of this implementation phase, steal stuff. Seriously, most of the UX problems you are currently facing have already been elegantly solved by someone else. You should spend time actively looking at other products and gathering inspiration. Notice how every great human designer starts a new project by pulling together a massive mood board of screenshots? You should be doing exactly the same thing. Remember, AI models are essentially just prediction engines. They are only ever as good as the context you feed them. By stealing great design patterns and pulling those visual pieces together, you provide incredibly high-quality, targeted context to your AI agents, which dramatically elevates what they produce. And finally, we arrive at Section 5, Explore Your Taste. This is it, the most crucial stage of the whole framework, where we overcome the typical engineer's lack of a visual solution library. Now, taste can often feel like this elusive, exclusive artistic trait reserved for hipsters hanging out in coffee shops. But we need to radically redefine it. Taste is simply reflecting on your own reaction to something. It's a highly practical necessity to keep your product from devolving into generic slop. And here is the truth. Product engineers actually do have excellent taste. You know immediately when an app looks bad or feels totally clunky to use, right? What you usually lack is just the mental library of visual solutions to pull from to fix it. Building that library isn't magic. It just takes reps. You have to try things, pay close attention to how you react to them, and intentionally build up that muscle memory of good design.
Which brings us to our final takeaway. Developing this refined taste requires an approach we can playfully call agricultural threshing. Since many teams don't have a full-time designer, they just throw a new design in the middle of the room and brutally beat it with sticks through rigorous, iterative critique until whatever is left is actually good. It can be a tough process, for sure, but it is exactly how you refine your taste and strip away the generic AI fluff. Embrace the critique, set your constraints intentionally, and let's conquer AI slop for good. So I'll leave you with this. What is the first piece of generic AI design that you are going to ruthlessly deconstruct today? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I'll see you next time.